Hi, my name is Julie, and this is part 2 of the Jayhawks Quilt Project series. In this part, I'm going to be showing you some ProStitcher quilting, free motion quilting, and ruler work. In part 1, I showed basting a quilt, and in part 3, I plan to show you how I worked around a beautiful embroidered Jayhawk in the center of the quilt. Thank you for visiting my channel. Please like and subscribe. I appreciate you very much. This is the Jayhawks quilt, and here is a close-up of it. I choose 3 designs that I like together, and in the first row I decide I'm going to put design 1 in the first block, design 2 in the second block, and then I'll continue that, repeating 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 across row 1. Now on row 3, I'll do the same thing, but I'll start with design 2, so it will be 2, 1, 2, 1. Every other row has a block that is centered in this on-point square, and I'm going to put my third design in that. This is a sketch I did for myself when I was in the planning stage. I drew out just a little bit of the quilt, and then I made some notes for myself, noting that in the square border that's on point, I wanted to do some lines using rulers and do some swirls inside that, and then pebbles on the outside of that on point square. And then I started some ideas for what I might want to use for the center part of this quilt. It was finally time to get started quilting, and I want to start with ProStitcher, so I open my console, make sure all my settings are where I want them. I change my stitch per inch to 12. That's what I'm doing right there. I make sure I'm on regulated and cruise, and that I have my orange crosshairs on, and that means my gears are on and I'm ready for ProStitcher. So I go to File, and I go find where I've stored the designs I'm going to use for Jayhawks quilt, and I have them on a flash drive. So I go find those and bring in that first one to get it placed and to get started stitching. My design 1 is called Monkey Wrench. I bring that in, and the first thing I want to do is to mark an area using the first block on my quilt so that I have the position where I want this to stitch. I didn't show everything in this video on this first block like I would like to, but I did the second time I use it, so you'll get to see exactly how I mark the area. So once I have this area box though, I do need to position the design in the middle of it, and there are several ways to do that. On this one, I believe I just chose to skew it because the block was not perfectly straight, and I'll go over that in a moment too. And then I get ready and stitch that out on ProStitcher. I feel like it's a more efficient use of my time to continue by doing all of my block 1s throughout that row before I go to block 2, instead of doing block 1, then block 2, and then block 1 and block 2. So I am going to move past this next block and get ready to start another block 1. I look at ProStitcher tablet, I select area and clear, because that's the area for the first block I did. Here I will make a multi-point area box by using the diamond-shaped button on my right handlebar to mark that. So as I move this and push the button, you will hear a sound on my machine, and that's putting points. And then in a moment we're going to look up at the ProStitcher tablet, and I don't see anything, and that's because it's out of my viewing area, so I hit the Home tab. Now guess what? Once commands are attached to a design, those commands stay with the design until you clear or delete that design or change the commands. So that's what's cool. The more times you do block 1, you just have to mark the area and it will pop into place, because the first time I marked the area, I either centered it and gave it that command, or I chose skew to skew it to my area box. Notice that I have a glide foot on my machine. I like to use the glide foot when I'm doing edge to edge using ProStitcher. That was the last quilt that I did, so that was the foot that I had on there. If I had my ruler foot, I may have just left it on. But for now, I'm leaving the glide foot on until I need to start using my rulers, and then I will have to change to a ruler foot, and I'll have to make sure I have my ruler base on. I really like the glide foot also for marking the plumb line at the top of the quilt. So for now, we're keeping that on. In a little bit, we will need to change feet. I'm changing the clip speed to 4 times the normal rate. I do want to play out the rest of this row. For those new to quilting, I think it helps to see the whole process. For those advanced quilters, you might want to fast forward here. Now I will need to pass the block where block 2 will be, and I'm going to mark my area again here in fast motion. And it will naturally fall into place inside that area like it did last time, and we're ready to stitch the same design again. Now think about this for a minute. I am doing all of my design 1s on row 1. Then when I do design 2 and make that area, I will have to either go to align and center the design. I may have to resize that design. I may want to skew it. That all depends. Now, this isn't the only way that you can do this. Of course, there are always options. And a little bit later in the video, I will show you how you can bring in all the designs for that row and get them all set up and then set it to stitch. I feel like I don't really save time by doing that. It's just kind of, what do I feel like at the time? Do I feel like putting all my designs out there and getting them all ready to go, and then just be around to monitor and to clip my threads whenever I get to a long jump pause in between everyone? Or do I want to do them one at a time? So there are a few positives for each way of doing it, but as far as saving time, I don't see that it's really any difference in time. It just is going to be what you prefer, and you may be like me, that there's sometimes you feel like doing them one at a time, and sometimes you feel like setting up the entire row. So it's just how you're feeling. Now I am working on putting in the number 2 designs in the blocks that we skipped. And I think we're going to move on from here. Let's take a look at row 1 since we have all of the ProStitcher elements finished on that row. Now I'm ready to do the ruler part and the free motion. So I've already put on my ruler foot. As you will see here, it's very important to have this, otherwise you will ruin your rulers, cause damage to your machine and your hands. This is my ruler base, and that too is very important. Whenever you're using rulers, you just can't do it without that base. So I put it on, and then it needs to be snapped in. And there we go. The item hanging down there is what I use to hold my phone so I can record up close sometimes. Sorry about that. I also have a little holder on the front of my long arm where I have some room for my little snippets to hang down. And I should have taken that off for you as well. I'll probably do that in a moment. So I'm showing you here that this part is all hard underneath there where my base is, and that helps me to put some pressure on my ruler. And I also want to change now on my console, and I'm still in regulated, but I want precision. I always go to precision when I'm working on a ruler. And also I'm going to want my needle down, which I did not do right there, but probably go back and change that in just a moment when I realize that I didn't do that. Now go to ProStitcher and select gears, and notice that those go purple when the gears are off. If you try to do any ruler work or free motion with the gears in place, it is like driving without power steering. It's really tough to do. So we have the gears on for ProStitcher and take them off for this next step. I'm going to use my ruler. This is a ruler from Piece N Quilt. It's one of my go-to rulers that I use probably daily. I first go around everything, and I'm going to go around every single block as well. Every block, all four sides. And on here, I'll outline everything in a stitch in the ditch. My stitch in the ditch is no way is it perfect, but it's close enough, I think, and when it's all said and done, it all looks good. I'm going to do some pebbles here now in the outer parts of the triangle, do some pebbles. And, you know, I turn everything to cruise, and I'm in regulated and cruise. Sometimes I really like doing my pebbles in a fast manual speed. So that's just a matter of preference. There's no rule about what you have to use here. I would say just probably not precision. You either want regulated cruise or you want a manual stitch. If you're on manual, then you have to make sure that you keep an eye on your stitch length, and if they're getting real long, you need to slow yourself down, and vice versa. Because, you know, in manual, you're not having regulated stitches. The regulator is not on. When I'm stitching pebbles, I am normally in my head mentally saying to myself, round, 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 because I'm reminding myself to keep them round. I don't want each one to be the same size. I don't want to fill every little spot. It's okay if they don't, you know, fill in every little gap. It's really better if they don't, but I really want to try to make them round. You can see I'm showing kind of with my finger there little places where there aren't any pebbles, and that's okay because that's more realistic. You wouldn't have them all squished in everywhere. I want my lines on here to be a 1/2 inch apart, so I'm going to line up the ruler, the first line on the ruler, with the last stitch I did. I could use a little bit of help knowing where to stop my lines before I turn the other way. So I'm using this air erasable pen to mark a little line right there where the fabric turns the other direction. And that's going to be my goal, is to try to stop right about in there before I turn my ruler for the other side. Now, one would think this should be really simple. I mean, how hard can this be? Just line up a ruler on the line that you see on the ruler. Everything be great, right? Well, when I started this, I didn't do such a good job as I did later. Later on, I got the hang of it, kind of knew where my stops and starts would be and all that, and just got more comfortable with it. After I finished the quilt, I came back to this block and picked out all these lines and redid them because they just weren't looking great. And part of that could have been my lack of confidence starting out. I don't know what it was, but it happens. It happens to me anyway, all the time. So just don't feel bad about that. One of the easiest things to pick out is a straight line. So it didn't take me very long to pick these stitches out and redo them to have a little more finished look than what I ended up with here. It's time to do some free motion swirls. I have this set at regulated and cruise, but occasionally I do like to use a manual setting also. Let's talk about an option you have of putting several designs out on your tablet all at once and getting them all ready to stitch on the same row. So I've brought in like my block 2 design, and I already have the area and everything all done for the very first one, the very first block. But I have to be careful not to skew this to an area or something, because as you remember from before, when we delete an area and we go do a new area, if that first design has a bunch of commands to it, it's just going to pop right into that second area. So we have to be careful for that not to happen. So this is what I have done. I have just made sure my design is the right size, and I have put it into the center part of that first area, and I have it fitting nicely without a bunch of commands to it. And then I went to area and I deleted that area. So now I have it sitting though where it's supposed to be. Now I need to mark an area for this next block. So I'm going around the block using my diamond key, and I'm marking point, 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 point all around that block. Now remember, we can't have two areas open at once. So I deleted the area for the first one, but it is sitting right where it needs to be. So now I push the home button and you can see where that area is. Well, I don't want to move the first design, so I'm going to have to bring in a new one, or I'm going to have to copy the first one or duplicate it, something like that. So now I'm just zooming in so I can see a little bit better, and I'm just taking my finger and I'm dropping this in. Now, rather than skewing, remember that could be a problem when I'm doing multiple things. If this were not fitting well, I would just want to resize it a little bit or rotate it a little bit. Now I have those two designs, and I'm going to delete that second area I made. But see, they're both sitting in the position they need to be in. You don't have to have an area box sitting there. You use the area box to tell you where to get your design, but you don't have to leave it there. So now I'm going to the next block where I'll need that design, and I'm marking my points for my area. Point, ding, point, ding, point, ding. For some reason, I love the sound of that little ding. Okay, I'm going to hit home again so I can see all of my places. There's where I need that third block to be. And it doesn't have to be the same block. You know, I could be doing my block ones, all of them as well. This time I'm choosing to do just the block twos just to show you this example. So I get this positioned within that area. I have all three of mine. I'm going to clear that area. I have 3. So I'm going to go down here and select none, so I don't have anything selected. Then I want to select them in the order that I want them to stitch. So I'm going to select the first block, then the second, and see, you can see that long jump pause there, and then the third. So they're all connected. I've got all 3 of them. And it's time for me to move my long arm back over to the area of the quilt where that first one is going to stitch. I don't have to. I could watch patiently while the machine moves slowly over there. But, you know, it's just better to move it on over there. Saves a little time. And then I'm going to go to ProStitcher, Quilt, Run, Proceed, and it will start stitching on the first block. The stitching is about completed for this first block. So let's see how we transition to the second one. It's doing the tack stitches, and it stops, and here we have our long jump pause come up on the screen. So I need to grab the pull up the bobbin and cut thread just like you normally do when any kind of stitching is complete. Then I'll move the long arm over towards the part where we need to stitch next. And that's what it is. It's a long jump pause in between them. It won't just do the whole entire row. You have to be there to cut thread, to start things up again, but it can be kind of nice to just get it all set, and maybe you can be doing a little something next to your long arm and monitoring these points where you have your long jump pause in between them. So you'll just continue this for the next block and the next, however many you have. This is the way you do several in one pass. I do want to remind you that when you come to your 1-inch basting stitch that runs horizontally, you will need to remove that before you do any stitching. You don't want to stitch over that. It's okay to leave the 1/4-inch side basting seams, but do take this one out. That's all I have for this video on part 2. I have one more part. Part 3 is how I deal with the center part of this quilt, where there was a beautiful embroidered Jayhawks, and how I dealt with working around that. Thank you so much for joining me. See you on the next one.